So I know that there's hundreds of 1080p versus 4K videos out there, but I wanted to make this video specifically geared towards the Sony A6000 line of cameras, you know, the 6400, 6500, 6600, all of those ones that can film in 4K basically. So let's get straight into it and I'll let you know my thoughts at the end of the video. I'm just going to throw all the camera settings on the screen. Feel free to pause the video if you want to check this out in a bit more detail. Let's kick things off with this handsome fella. In all of the examples you're about to see, the 4K footage is going to kind of be on the right hand side of the screen and the 1080p footage on the left hand side. I'm working in a 4K timeline, so all the 1080p footage is effectively doubled in size to suit the 4K footage, more commonly known as being upscaled. With each example, I'm also going to punch in to 200% in the 4K footage and 400% in the 1080 footage, just so you guys can get a closer look at what's actually going on. I'm aware that most of you guys are probably watching this footage on your phone, so I'm hoping that you can still see the differences here between the two resolutions. YouTube is always going to compress the quality of the video, but I am going to export this at a real high bitrate to try and counteract that. Another suggestion I would make is to try giving this video a watch on your TV as well, because I think that's really going to help illustrate the differences. Something that I did notice on this example and the following example is that the highlights seem to lose quite a lot of detail and seem a bit more exposed. Now I'm going to put that down to, on this example and the following one you're about to see, were shot outside, and this example was shot right by a window, so I guess I'm just going to put it down, I think, to just, you know, perhaps a slight change in the light outside. But you know, to my eye it didn't seem to change that much in real life, so I'm quite surprised at how different the highlights seem to be. So as I just mentioned, although all my exposure settings remain the same, you'll see here there is far more detail in the sky still on the 4K footage as opposed to the 1080 footage, which is not fully blown out. You know, I think I did sort of expose it fairly correctly, but it has lost a lot of detail still. At this point, you might be saying, well, hold on a minute, Stu, all these examples are set to -7 sharpness, so of course, you know, they're not going to be looking their best. So what I'm going to do now is add a little bit of sharpening in post. So in this example here, we've got the original 1080p footage on the left-hand side, and we've got the sharpened footage on the right-hand side, which is certainly helping, but you'll see it's putting quite a lot of noise into the shadows as well. And then just for comparison, we've got the original 4K footage on the right here, and the sharpened 1080p footage on the left, which still, as you can see, looks nowhere near as clean as the 4K footage. I was also interested to see how the sharpening would affect that first example with the footage of my face, which, as you can see, again, is introducing noise into the footage. So in answer to the question of, is the 1080p any good out of these cameras? Well, in my opinion, no, not really. It's super soft. In fact, some of those examples you've just seen, I actually went back and filmed again because I was convinced that I'd missed the focus on them. The ones of, you know, like the baby Yoda, a couple of them, to be honest, the one with my face, even though I knew it was kind of tracking my eye, I thought, oh, maybe something's gone wrong, I'll go back and film it again, you know, just to be double sure. But I filmed it again, and the same thing happened again. They just came out really soft. Admittedly, I did have the 1080p, as was the 4K, set to -7 in the detail, because it's generally regarded as best practice to have that at the lowest setting in camera and apply the sharpening in post. If, however, you do want a bit of a simpler workflow, I'd definitely say, you know, try setting the sharpness to 0, which I know sounds zero, setting it to 0, but even at 0, it's still going to be applying sharpening. So for a quicker workflow, that probably would be better, as opposed to, you know, if you're sharpening in post, you're effectively adding a sharpening effect, which is going to increase the rendering time. But you will have a bit more control, especially if you use the unsharp mask, over what parts of the footage you want to sharpen and what parts you want to leave alone, you can kind of use that threshold setting. I'm not going to go into that too much now, but generally, to summarise, it is better to sharpen in post than in camera. I guess at the end of the day as well, it all depends what you want to use the footage for. If it's for friends, family, for yourself, you know, your own YouTube videos where the only person really critiquing it is yourself, if you're happy with softer footage that you just want to sharpen a bit and you want to reduce all those file sizes down, then obviously, you know, you can shoot in 1080, and when people are viewing on phones, it's not going to be quite so noticeable. I still use the 1080 footage out of these cameras just for the slow motion side of things. You know, I'll shoot all my 100 frames per second slow motion stuff at 1080. Well, I've not really got any choice, it can't film that kind of stuff in 4K. I use that for 1080, and I just use that as B-roll clips sort of scattered throughout my 4K footage. So sort of, you know, I find sort of little bits here and there. It's not going to be too noticeable. No one really picks up, no one ever really says like, oh God, that looks super soft, that bit. You know, have a little bit of sharpening, it's usually fine. But if I were going to be shooting something a bit more serious, something that was going to potentially be sort of viewed more so on a desktop or even TVs, like weddings for example, I'd definitely be making sure to film most of that footage in 4K because it is so much more crisp than the 1080. These cameras, I believe, actually kind of record the footage in 6K and downsample it to 4K in camera, which is why it really is so sharp. So anyway, I hope that all came in useful. If it did, please do think about liking and subscribing. My whole channel is geared around the Sony camera system and the Sigma Primes, so if that's something you're looking to get into, hopefully this channel will be of use. If you've got any questions or queries about, you know, the whole 1080p versus 4K thing, do leave them down in the comments and I'll try my best to come back to you and help you out. And I'll see you again in the next one. Cheers.